The salt-laced wind whipped tendrils of my hair across my face, a familiar sting against my skin. It was late, the kind of late that bleeds into the next day before I even notice. The Yacht Marina after midnight, wrong slip number. That's where I found myself, a phantom drawn to the ghosts of my own making. The air hung thick with the scent of brine and diesel, a perfume I'd once associated with purpose, with the hunt. Now it just smelled like decay. My worn leather jacket, a relic from a life I'd shed like a snake's skin, offered little warmth against the chill that seeped not just from the night, but from within. Each creak of a distant mast, each slap of water against a hull, was a note in a symphony of regret. I'd traded my badge for a bottle, my sharp mind for a dull ache, the city's underbelly for the quiet desperation of a bar stool. But some calls, some scents, they cut through the fog. This one had. A coded message, delivered by a street rat with eyes too old for his years, had landed in my hand like a live grenade. Not for money, not for information on the usual grifters. This one spoke of a pattern, a specific chilling pattern that had been etched into my memory like acid. I'd been told to meet a contact near the Serenity, a name that felt like a cruel joke in this desolate expanse. But the slip number was wrong. Or rather, the boat wasn't the Serenity. It was a sleek, black vessel, its nameplate a gleaming silver blur in the moonlight, the Oracle. My gut, a muscle I'd learned to trust more than any informant, clenched. This was no casual rendezvous. My eyes scanned the deserted docks. A lone security guard, silhouetted against a distant floodlight, was a mere speck. The kind of speck that could be blind or bought. My footsteps echoed on the polished wood, each one a beat closer to the precipice. Inside, the air was still, heavy with the scent of expensive polish and something else. Something metallic, a faint, coppery tang. The main salon was a testament to ostentatious wealth, all plush velvet and gleaming chrome. But it was the details that snagged my attention, the subtle dissonances that screamed louder than any alarm. A faint smear on the edge of a nearby cabinet, almost invisible, but I saw it. Then I saw him. Not a welcome party, not a contact. A victim. I approached with caution, my hand instinctively reaching for a phantom weight at my hip. The man was still, too still. The stillness was absolute, the kind that only comes after the fight is over, and then I saw it. A small, almost artistic arrangement of objects beside the body. 3 polished river stones perfectly aligned. A single black feather resting delicately on top. And a faint, intricate knot tied in a length of crimson silk draped across the man's chest. My breath hitched. It was him, the phantom I'd chased through the labyrinthine alleys of my past, the architect of my undoing. The killer I'd failed to apprehend. He was back, or rather a copycat, the meticulousness, the signature, the same twisted artistry that had haunted my dreams for years. This wasn't just a crime, it was a declaration. I knelt, my movements slow and deliberate, my gaze fixed on the macabre tableau. The river stones were smooth, cool to the touch. The feather, impossibly black, seemed to absorb the dim light, and the silk knot. It was complex, a sailor's knot, but tied with a sinister grace. They'd called him the Weaver. This wasn't a random act, this was a performance. And I, Cole, the disgraced detective, was being cast in a familiar role, the reluctant protagonist, the man who had to face his demons to save others from them. The wrong slip number, the Oracle, it all clicked into place with a sickening finality. The Weaver hadn't sent me to a contact, he'd sent me to his stage, and I had walked right into it. I was back in the game, whether I wanted to be or not, and the stakes had never been higher. That's where I found myself, a phantom drawn to the ghosts of my own past. The water lapped against the pilings, a mournful rhythm that echoed the hollowness inside me. My breath plumed white in the frigid air, the dampness seeping into the worn leather of my jacket. This place, usually a symphony of clinking glasses and hushed conversations, was now a graveyard of slumbering giants, their masked skeletal fingers against the bruised velvet sky. I'd come here on a whisper, a sliver of a tip from a contact who'd melted back into the shadows before I could even offer a thank eye. A peculiar find, they'd said, something that might interest me. The understatement hung in the air like the scent of diesel and decaying rope. It was the same kind of oblique hint that had always preceded a descent, a plunge into the murky depths where the light struggled to penetrate. My boots crunched on the weathered planks of the dock, each step a deliberate sound in the overwhelming quiet. The slip number was indeed wrong, a stark contrast to the elegant calligraphy on the polished brass plate of the vessel moored there. This was no ordinary pleasure craft. It was a behemoth, all sleek lines and predatory angles, its hull a deep, impenetrable black. My gaze swept over the deck, my detective's instinct, a muscle I'd tried to atrophy, twitching back to life. The usual detritus of a hasty exit was absent. No overturned glasses, no scattered belongings. It was too neat, too sterile, almost as if someone had erased their presence. This was the kind of meticulousness I knew. I moved closer, my senses on high alert. A faint, metallic tang tickled my nostrils, a scent I'd once associated with a very specific, very unpleasant kind of work. Not blood, not quite, something sharper, more precise. I knelt, my gloved fingers brushing against the slick, varnished wood of the deck. I leaned in, my breath catching. It was a residue, a pale, almost iridescent film. It looked like paint, but not just any paint. The kind used for detailed work, for fine lines. My mind, a restless beast, began to churn. The recent string of heists, the impossible precision, the lack of witnesses, the clean getaways, they all bore the hallmarks of the ghost. That's what I'd called him. He'd vanished 5 years ago after I'd failed to connect the dots, failed to stop him. The weight of that failure had been my constant companion ever since, and now this. A yacht, abandoned with an odd smear of paint. It felt too coincidental to be mere chance. The tip had been vague but potent. It had lured me here, to this desolate corner of the city, to this silent testament to wealth and secrecy. I rose slowly, my eyes scanning the surrounding boats. But one, a smaller fishing trawler a few slips down, had a faint light spilling from its cabin window. A flicker of movement caught my eye. My heart gave a familiar, unwelcome thump against my ribs. This was a precipice. Stepping further would mean shedding the carefully constructed apathy I'd built around myself. It would mean wading back into the muck I'd sworn to leave behind. But the ghost of the past, the one I'd failed to apprehend, was stirring. And this meticulously abandoned vessel felt like its first breath. I approached the edge of the dock, peering down at the water. The black hull of the yacht gleamed, reflecting the sliver of moon that had finally managed to pierce the clouds. The metallic tang was stronger here, near the waterline. I ran my gloved finger along the hull, collecting a minuscule sample of the same iridescent residue. It was almost oily, clinging to the material. I carefully placed it into a small evidence bag I always carried, a habit I couldn't quite break. This wasn't just a hunch anymore. And I, despite every fiber of my being screaming caution, was about to pull. The detective in me, the one I'd tried to bury, was awake. And it was hungry. That's where I found myself, a phantom drawn to the ghosts of my old life. The glint of moonlight on polished chrome, the gentle creak of hulls against piling sounds that used to be the soundtrack to my success, now just echoes of my failure. The slip number I'd been given, scrawled on a crumpled napkin tucked into a dead drop, was indeed wrong. Not by much, just 1 digit off. A deliberate misdirection or a careless mistake. The latter felt unlikely given the precision of the previous incidents. This wasn't amateur hour. This was a performance. My gaze swept over the silent behemoths tethered to their berths. Each one a monument to excess, their sleek lines and opulent decks whispering of fortunes made and spent. I moved with a practiced quiet, my footsteps muffled by the weathered wood. The air was thick with the briny perfume of the sea, a scent that usually soothed me, but tonight it felt like a shroud. The note had been cryptic, hinting at a final flourish. I'd expected something small, a symbolic gesture, but as I neared the correct slip, a knot of unease tightened in my gut. The yacht moored there was larger than the others, a triple-masted beast named the Siren's Call. Her hull, a deep midnight blue, seemed to absorb the dim light, and her decks were a sprawling expanse of teak. And then I saw it. Not a dropped item, not a discarded tool. It was a painting. A large, framed canvas propped against the railing of the main deck, facing the open water. Even from this distance, the subject matter was unmistakable. A woman, her features obscured by shadow, her hand reaching out towards a city skyline rendered in stark, brutalist lines. The same unsettling composition, the same unsettling palette. My breath hitched. This was no mere imitation. This was a statement, a taunt. They weren't just replicating the method of the killer I'd hunted. They were recreating the essence of his crimes. Each heist, each meticulously executed theft, was a step closer to whatever endgame this phantom orchestrator had in mind. Was it the perpetrator, or just a late-night wanderer? My instincts screamed the former. I reached for my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen. Who did I even call? The precinct was a labyrinth of bureaucracy, a place where my name was mud. The detective in charge of the current string of thefts, a sharp-eyed woman I'd only met briefly, would likely dismiss me as a meddling has-been. But the stakes had just been raised dramatically. This wasn't just about recovering stolen goods anymore. This was about a pattern, a horrifying echo that was becoming too loud to ignore. As I dialed, the distant wail of a siren cut through the night. It was faint at first, then grew steadily louder, its mournful cry mirroring the ache in my chest. They were coming. Someone had tipped them off, but who and why? Had my presence here been detected, or was this part of the plan? Another piece of the puzzle deliberately placed. I pocketed the phone, the siren song now a frantic thrumming in my ears. The figure was gone. The painting remained, a silent witness to a crime that had yet to be fully understood. I had to move. The marina was about to become a scene, and I didn't want to be caught in the harsh glare of official scrutiny. Not yet. Not until I understood what this performance truly meant. The city skyline, so stark and indifferent, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next act. The past, it seemed, was not content to remain buried. It was rising with a vengeance. The air hung heavy, thick with the tang of brine and something else, something metallic and sharp that pricked at my nostrils. My shoes crunched on a scattering of oyster shells as I moved, each step a deliberate intrusion into the hushed quiet. The water lapped against the pilings, a mournful rhythm that echoed the unease coiling in my gut. This was it. The tip had been vague, a whisper on a burner phone that cut out before I could press for details. Slip 17, they know you're looking. A taunt or a desperate plea. I've been chasing shadows for weeks. The echoes of the butchers work a constant hum beneath the surface of my life. Now the hum was growing louder, vibrating with a dangerous resonance. Slip 17. The yachts moored here were opulent, gleaming behemoths that dwarfed the smaller fishing vessels bobbing nearby. Their polished hulls reflected the weak moonlight, distorted islands of light in the inky water. Fitting. It was the allure of the forbidden, the promise of what lay hidden beneath the glittering surface that had always drawn me in. A faint light flickered from the cabin of the siren's call, not the steady glow of a security system, but a warm, wavering luminescence. Someone was here. My breath hitched. This was not the empty rendezvous I'd half expected, a staged scene to throw me off. This was active. I moved with a practiced stealth, the years of muscle memory kicking in. My boots made no sound on the teak deck. I pressed my ear against the cool wood, straining to hear over the rhythmic sigh of the waves, muffled voices, a man's low murmur, a woman's sharper intake of breath, not the hushed tones of hushed business. This sounded personal. Peering through the gap, I saw them. A woman, her back to me, was meticulously arranging something on a small table. Opposite her sat a man, his face obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. He gestured with a gloved hand, his voice a low rumble that I couldn't quite decipher. Then the woman turned. Her face was a mask of concentration, but as she reached for a small, velvet-lined box, the light caught a glint of metal. A delicate silver locket. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that locket. I'd seen it before in a crime scene photo, nestled against a victim's pale skin. The butcher's signature. My mind reeled. This wasn't a copycat. This was him. Why now? The heists had been bold, daring, but they hadn't involved this kind of Intimacy, they were clean, efficient, almost sterile. This felt different. This felt like a ritual. The man spoke again, his voice clearer this time, laced with a smug satisfaction. They will understand. They must understand. Understand what? The locket. It was more than just a trophy. I remembered the file, the endless hours poring over the details. Each victim had a connection, a seemingly random thread that had eluded us. A shared profession, a hobby, a geographical link. But the locket, it had been present in only one of the butcher's cases, a detail the department had dismissed as a curious anomaly. Now it was the thread that might unravel everything. I pulled back from the door, my heart a heavy drum against my ribs. The metallic tang in the air intensified, a coppery scent that spoke of old fears and fresh blood. I needed to know who the woman was, what her connection was to the man, and what they were doing with that locket. My gaze swept across the deck of the siren's call. A loose coil of rope lay near the stern, carelessly discarded, not fresh but old, faded. Another echo, or a deliberate clue. The man's voice, now tinged with impatience, carried on the wind. The next one is already chosen. The arrangements are being made. The next one. They weren't just replaying the past. They were actively building a future. And if the pattern held, if the locket was the key, then I had a terrifyingly short window to decipher the connection before another life was extinguished. The ghosts of my past weren't just haunting me. They were orchestrating a symphony of destruction, and I was the only one left to hear the discordant notes. I had to find the missing pieces, the unseen links, before the final movement played out. The salt-laced air clung to my skin, thick with the metallic tang of diesel and the faint, cloying sweetness of decay. It was a scent I knew intimately, a perfume of regret that clung to the edges of the yacht marina after midnight wrong slip number. The moon, a sliver of bone in the ink-black sky, cast long, skeletal shadows across the bobbing hulls. My breath plumed in the chill, each exhale a small, white flag of surrender in the face of the vast, indifferent sea. I'd followed the locket's trail here, a thread of tarnished silver leading me through the labyrinthine streets of the city's forgotten corners. The pawn shop owner, a man with eyes like chips of obsidian and fingers perpetually stained with ink, had spoken of a woman. He described her as having a particular fondness for the water, for the quiet hum of engines at rest. The slip numbers, haphazardly painted on weathered pilings, blurred in the dim light. My contact, a nervous informant with a penchant for cheap whiskey and even cheaper lies, had insisted Sila's operated from a particular vessel. He'd been vague about the exact berth, muttering something about the one that doesn't belong. A wrong slip number, he'd called it, a vessel out of place. My worn leather soles scraped against the damp wood of the pier. The rhythmic creak of rigging, the gentle lapping of waves against fiberglass, it was a symphony of stillness, a deceptive calm that always preceded the storm. I passed a sleek white catamaran, its lines sharp and modern, then a weathered trawler, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. None felt right. The informant's words echoed in my mind. He likes things subtle, cold, things that blend in but not too much. Then I saw it. A vessel that sat lower in the water than its neighbors, its hull a deep, bruised purple, almost black, that seemed to absorb the meager light. No nameplate, no garish trim, just a silent, watchful presence. It was docked at slip 17. The informant had mentioned a preference for odd numbers, a superstition he'd attributed to Sila's. But the slip number felt too neat, too obvious. A trap, or a deliberate misdirection. I checked the adjacent slips, numbers 15 and 19. This was it. My hand instinctively tightened around the reassuring weight of the service weapon beneath my jacket. Years had passed since I'd worn the badge, but the instincts remained, sharp and insistent. The gangplank to the purple yacht sagged slightly under my weight, something floral yet metallic, like wilted roses dipped in iron. I moved through the main cabin, a study in understated opulence. The only light came from the faint glow of instrument panels, casting an eerie green luminescence. On a polished mahogany table, laid out with unnerving precision, were several items. A collection of vintage lock picks, glinting like surgical instruments. A small velvet-lined box, its lid ajar, revealing nothing, empty. Beside it, a single crimson rose. Its petals were beginning to curl, its once vibrant color dulled, but its scent, that unsettling blend of perfume and decay, was potent. A floorboard creaked behind me. My body reacted before my mind could process. I spun, drawing my weapon, the metallic click echoing in the confined space. Standing in the doorway, framed by the dim light of the corridor, was a figure. A woman, Sila's. "Your late detective," a voice purred, low and resonant like gravel smoothed by a river. It held no hint of surprise, no fear, a slow, deliberate movement. "Locket, you think I collect trinkets?" A soft, silken laugh followed, devoid of warmth. "You're looking for the wrong thing, Cole. You always have been." My grip on the weapon tightened. The heists, the patterns, they're the same as Elias Thorne's. Elias Thorne, the voice mused as if tasting a forgotten word. A crude artist, all flash, no finesse. Her eyes, when they met mine, were the color of storm clouds. And Ira, his successor. I pushed, trying to regain control, to steer this conversation back to the precipice of revelation. "I am his." Editor, Sila's corrected, a faint smile playing on her lips. "He wrote the first draft. I'm refining the narrative," gestured to the empty velvet box. This was the beginning, a preview. My mind raced, the empty box, the rose, the locket. It wasn't a simple replay, it was an evolution, a cruel, artistic interpretation. "The locket is next," I stated, a desperate attempt to force her hand. Sila's took another step, and I saw it then. A subtle shift in her posture, a coiled tension in her shoulders. She wasn't alone, a flicker of movement. And promises are meant to be kept, but not by me. A heavy thud from the deck, then another. The smell of ozone intensified, sharp and acrid. A searing pain exploded in my shoulder, knocking the breath from my lungs. My weapon clattered to the floor. I stumbled back, catching myself on a bulkhead, my vision swimming. Men. Hardened, silent, their faces obscured by the gloom. They moved with brutal efficiency, their intent clear. Sila's watched, a detached observer, him storm cloud eyes fixed on my struggle. "I made a mistake coming here, Cole," he said, his voice carrying over the growing cacophony of my own ragged breathing. "This chapter isn't yours to write." A heavy boot connected with my ribs, sending a fresh wave of agony through me. The scent of wilted roses and iron filled my senses, a bitter promise of what was to come. The salt-laced air, thick with the scent of diesel and brine, stung my nostrils. My head throbbed, a dull, insistent drumbeat against the symphony of the waves lapping against the hull of the Serenity. Sunlight, a brutal, unforgiving glare, bounced off the polished chrome of the Yacht marina after midnight wrong slip number. I pushed myself up, each movement a protest from bruised muscles. My ribs screamed in silent accusation. Sila's, the bastard, leaving me for dead on the deck of his floating mausoleum. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd buried me with the rest of his secrets. But Sila's had always underestimated the stubbornness of a man with nothing left to lose. The memory of his smug, retreating back, the glint of the instrument panel, it fueled a slow burn in my gut, a heat that promised to consume everything. My gaze swept over the opulent vessels bobbing gently, each one a testament to excess, a gilded cage floating on a sea of indifference. Somewhere among them, Sila's was already miles away, or perhaps just docked at another exclusive cove, counting his ill-gotten gains. But he'd made a mistake. He'd left me alive, and he'd left behind the breadcrumbs. My fingers, still sticky with something I didn't want to identify, fumbled in my pocket. The small, tarnished silver locket. It had been tucked into the lining of my jacket, a detail I'd only discovered once I'd managed to drag myself away from the scene, leaving the Serenity to its silent, sun-drenched betrayal. Silas's meticulous planning, his signature. This locket, identical to the ones found at the previous crime scenes, but somehow different. It was a taunt, a challenge. I remembered the hushed whispers in the precinct, the hushed tones of the forensics team. They'd been obsessed with the killer's precision, the almost surgical removal of specific items from each victim. Not wealth, not jewels, but specific artifacts. Items of sentimental value. They'd theorized, but this locket, it felt more than sentimental, it felt personal. I walked, a limping shadow, along the wooden planks, the rhythmic creak of the marina a counterpoint to my ragged breathing. The sun beat down, a relentless hammer. I needed answers, and I knew where to find them. The warehouse. The one on the docks, overlooking the restless, gray expanse of the ocean. It was a place where secrets festered, a place Silas had used before, a place where he'd always felt safe. The warehouse doors groaned open, a mournful protest against my intrusion. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating stacks of crates and forgotten machinery. The air was thick with the ghosts of industry, a metallic tang that clung to my tongue. And there, in the center of the cavernous space, was the meticulously arranged tableau. It wasn't a crime scene. Not yet. It was a staging area. But this time, the items weren't just random. They were arranged in a specific order, a narrative unfolding before my eyes. A vintage pocket watch, a child's porcelain doll, a faded photograph of a woman I didn't recognize, and a collection of old letters tied with a silken ribbon. Silas wasn't just stealing. He was collecting, he was curating, and then I saw it. Tucked beneath the photograph, almost hidden, was a small, leather-bound journal. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This was it. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was elegant, almost calligraphic. It wasn't Silas's, it was a woman's, and the entries, they spoke of loss, of betrayal, of a deep, gnawing grief that had festered for years. The dates matched the timeline of the serial killings. My serial killings. The woman wrote of a life shattered, of stolen dreams and broken promises. She wrote of the man who had taken everything from her, the man who had walked away unscathed, leaving her to pick up the pieces. And as I read, a name began to form, a phantom from my past, a name I deliberately buried beneath layers of guilt and regret. The woman's name was Elena, and the man who had destroyed her life wasn't Silas, it was me. The heists, the murders, they weren't random acts of violence. They were a meticulous, years-in-the-making revenge. Silas, the skilled technician, the master planner, was merely the instrument. Elena was the conductor, her grief the symphony of destruction. The locket wasn't a taunt from Silas. It was a twisted memento from Elena, a cruel reminder of what I'd taken from her. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I hadn't failed to catch a killer. I had created one. That's where I'd woken up, tangled in expensive rope, the metallic tang of something coppery still clinging to my tongue. My coat was gone, my wallet, everything. And the phantom echo of a whisper, cold and precise, slithered through the lingering fog of whatever they'd given me. A taste of what's to come. The meticulous planning, the unsettling familiarity of the methods. It wasn't just echoing the ghost killer anymore. It was a direct challenge. They knew. They knew who I was, what I was looking for, and they were playing a game with me, a game where the board was littered with my failures. I pushed myself up, my muscles protesting with a sharp ache. The Serenity, a gleaming white beast of a yacht, bobbed gently, its expensive teak deck mocking my disheveled state. A half-eaten plate of caviar sat on a small table, a single champagne flute beside it, untouched. They hadn't been drinking. They had been waiting for me to stumble into their trap. A flicker of movement caught my eye, cloaked in shadows cast by the towering masts, was making their way along the boardwalk. Not a security guard. Too fluid, too deliberate. My gut tightened. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was targeted. I ducked behind a stack of coiled mooring lines, the rough fibers scratching against my cheek. The figure stopped near the Serenity, peering down at the deck. They were holding something small, something that glinted in the harsh morning light. A key. My blood, which had been sluggish, suddenly felt like it was being pumped through me by a runaway engine. That key, it looked disturbingly like the one I'd seen in the evidence photos from the last ghost killer case, the one that belonged to the victim's private study. A detail only a handful of people, including myself, would ever have known. The figure turned, and for a fleeting second the angle of the sun caught their face. A sharp jawline, eyes that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. I'd seen those eyes before, not on a suspect but on a witness. A witness I'd promised to protect. My breath hitched. The perpetrator wasn't just taunting me with the ghost killer's methods. They were targeting the few people I still had left. The stakes hadn't just been raised, they'd been shoved into the stratosphere. I had to move. Now, having seemingly satisfied themselves, turned and melted back into the labyrinth of boats. I waited until their silhouette was swallowed by the glare, then I broke cover. I scanned the marina, my eyes darting from one expensive hull to another. Where had they gone? And who were they? It spoke of an intimate understanding of my past, of my vulnerabilities. This wasn't just a criminal operation, it was a personal vendetta. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of information. The heists, the uncanny resemblance to the ghost killer's modus operandi, and now this. I made my way back to the access road, my senses on high alert. Every creak of a boat fender, every distant gull cry sounded like a threat. I needed to reach the witness, needed to warn them. But who was the figure? The description was too vague, too clouded by the light and my own disorientation. As I rounded a corner, a glint of metal on the ground caught my eye. It was a small, intricately designed cufflink, lying near where the figure had stood. I picked it up, turning it over in my fingers. It was made of obsidian, inlaid with a silver filigree that resembled a stylized raven. I'd seen this before, too, on the collar of the private investigator I'd consulted weeks ago, the one who'd claimed to have information about the ghost killer. He'd been cagey, evasive, but he'd seemed to know more than he was letting on. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this the same person? The one who had promised answers, who had hinted at a deeper conspiracy? Or was this another layer of misdirection, another piece of the elaborate puzzle designed to throw me off balance? The weight of the cufflink felt immense, a tangible symbol of the tightening noose. They weren't just hunting the ghost killer's ghost, they were hunting me. And they were using the people I cared about as bait. The game had irrevocably changed. It was no longer about justice, it was about survival. My survival and the survival of the few souls I still held dear. The Yacht Marina after midnight, wrong slip number, had been the beginning of the end, or perhaps the end of the beginning. I couldn't be sure, and that uncertainty was the most terrifying weapon of all. The salt spray stung my face, a bitter kiss from the indifferent sea. The air, thick with the cloying scent of diesel and brine, clung to my coat. I stood on the weathered planks of the Yacht Marina after midnight, wrong slip number, the moon a sliver of bone in the ink-black sky. Each creak of the moored vessels, each distant gull's cry, amplified the thrumming in my chest, a restless drumbeat against the silence. They wanted me here. This was the invitation delivered with the cold precision of a death sentence. The slip number was wrong, deliberately so. A small, almost imperceptible detail, but to them a taunt. They knew I'd be looking for the patterns, the deviations, the subtle tells that separated their work from the mundane. This was a puzzle piece placed just so to draw me in. None of them felt right. Too ostentatious, too clean. It had been in a warehouse, dust motes dancing in the lone shaft of moonlight, the air thick with the metallic tang of something long past its prime. Now it was the sea's damp breath, promising a different kind of drowning. The slip number was 37. The note, tucked into a folded newspaper on my doorstep, had said 37. But as I scanned the numbered buoys, the sequence felt off. 35, 36, 38, 39. A phantom number, just like the killer. I'd spent years chasing that phantom, and now it seemed the phantom was chasing me. I moved away from the designated spot, my steps deliberate, each one a calculated risk. My eyes scanned the surrounding slips. The ghost killer's signature was always in the details, in the meticulous erasure of his presence. He left no fingerprints, no stray hairs, no witnesses. This staged meeting, this carefully crafted misdirection. My gaze landed on a vessel docked further down, a brutalist silhouette against the faint glow of the distant city. It was older, its lines less graceful than the others, a workhorse of the sea rather than a pleasure craft. Its slip number was 41. It was a discrepancy, a ripple in the smooth surface of their game, discreetly. I need to know who's been keeping company with that old girl. The voice on the other end was gruff, accustomed to the midnight calls of a man who operated on the fringes. While I waited, I walked the length of the marina, my senses on high alert. The rhythmic lapping of water against hulls was a constant, unsettling murmur. A lone figure, silhouetted against the faint lights of the shore, moved with an unnatural stillness between the boats. Too purposeful for a late-night stroll, too clandestine for a fisherman. My breath hitched. Was this them or another decoy? My contact's voice crackled through the phone. Slip 41, Cole, registered to a shell corporation, but a name pinged on a security sweep. Someone who's been on our radar before, small-time muscle but with a taste for the elaborate, goes by Silas. Silas. The name meant nothing, yet it felt like a key turning in a rusted lock. The ghost killer never acted alone. He was the conductor, the architect. Silas was likely just a pawn, a hired hand to deliver the message, to set the stage. But a pawn could still be a valuable piece in this twisted game. I moved back towards slip 41, my steps now measured, deliberate. The trap was being set not just for Silas but for the Phantom himself. I'd let them think they had me cornered, following their breadcrumbs to this desolate waterfront. But they underestimated the hunger of a hunter who had nothing left to lose. I reached the edge of the slip, the dark water a mirror of the sky. The vessel at 41 was a freighter, its paint peeling, its deck cluttered with what looked like discarded fishing nets. It was a stark contrast to the gleaming yachts around it, a deliberate eyesore, a hiding place. Silas, he was waiting just as I expected, but he wasn't alone, the ghost killer or someone who knew his methods intimately. My hand instinctively went to the reassuring weight of the pistol concealed beneath my coat. This was it, the confrontation. The trap sprung. I took a breath, the salty air filling my lungs, a final, cleansing draft before the storm. The game was on. The salt-laced air whipped my hair across my face, a stinging reminder of the chill that had settled deep in my bones. The yacht marina after midnight, wrong slip number, that's where the cryptic note had led me. Not the sleek, well-lit docks I'd expected, but a forgotten corner where shadows clung like damp rags, and the only illumination came from the distant, indifferent glow of the city. The smell of brine mingled with the metallic tang of decay, a familiar perfume in my line of work. My footsteps echoed on the weathered planks, each creak a potential betrayal. I moved with a practiced stealth, the years of ingrained habit a second skin. The ghost killer, or whoever was pulling his strings now, had a penchant for the dramatic, for the staged. This desolate corner of the marina felt like a stage set, waiting for its final act. I found the boat. Not the sleek, modern vessel the intel suggested, but an aging trawler, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The slip number was indeed wrong, deliberately so. A trap, undoubtedly. But fear was a luxury I couldn't afford, not anymore. A flicker of movement caught my eye, cloaked in the night, emerged from the trawler's cabin. Tall, lean, with a stillness that spoke of coiled power. My breath hitched. It was the silhouette I'd seen in my nightmares, the phantom that had haunted my waking hours for a decade. Cole, a voice rasped, dry as bone. I knew I'd come, I always do, a moth to a flame drawn by the scent of my own failure. My hand instinctively went to the worn grip of the pistol tucked into my waistband. "It's over," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "This ends tonight." He chuckled, a sound devoid of mirth. "Ends? Cole, it's only just beginning. I see this. This is not about the past. This is about the future. A future where the weak are culled, where order is restored by decisive action." He gestured vaguely towards the city skyline, a distant, glittering promise of normalcy. I, with my outdated notions of justice, I can't comprehend the necessity. Smaller, wiry, carrying a heavy duffel bag. The pawn, Silas, perhaps. The name echoed in my mind. The ghost killer never worked alone. Silas, the phantom confirmed, as if reading my thoughts. Instrument my hands. My gaze darted between the two men. The phantom was the architect, the true monster. Sela's was merely the tool, but a tool could still inflict damage. The duffel bag, what was in it? More explosives, another message. I think I rest so clever, don't I? I spat, trying to buy time to assess. The phantom was confident, almost arrogant. That was his weakness. Cleverness is a matter of perspective, Cole. I see the patterns. I orchestrate the symphony. I merely react, a clumsy dancer tripping over my own feet. He took a step forward, his eyes, barely visible in the gloom, seemed to bore into me. Did I really think I'd leave loose ends? Sela's was a necessary exposure. He hadn't just been taunting me, he'd been luring me. Sela's wasn't a pawn, he was bait, and I had taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. Suddenly, Sela's moved, not towards me, but towards the trawler's mooring lines. A glint of metal in his hand, he was cutting them. The boat began to drift, pulled by an unseen current. A dramatic exit, the phantom mused, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. A final flourish. No, not if I could help it. I sprinted, my boots slapping against the wet planks. The phantom made no move to intercept me, his gaze fixed on the slowly departing trawler. He was letting Sela's go, letting him deliver whatever was in that bag. I reached Sela's as he scrambled over the railing, the duffel bag clutched tight. He turned, surprise etched on his face, quickly replaced by a primal fear. He wasn't a killer, not like the phantom. He was just a hired hand, a desperate man. Where are I going? I demanded, my voice a low growl. Nowhere, he whimpered, fumbling with the bag's clasp. I lunged, tackling him. We hit the deck with a jarring thud, the impact sending a jolt up my spine. The duffel bag flew from his grasp, landing a few feet away. Sela's thrashed, a cornered animal. I pinned him, my knee pressing into his chest, my hand clamped over his mouth. Talk, I grunted, the adrenaline surging through me. Then a sound, a low, rhythmic ticking. My blood froze. It wasn't the sound of a clock. It was the sound of a timer. My head snapped up. The phantom. He was still on the trawler, watching. The boat wasn't the target, it was the delivery system. The bag. I roared, shoving Sela's away. I scrambled for the duffel, my fingers fumbling with the latch. Inside, nestled amongst layers of packing foam, was a device. A compact, menacing contraption of wires and a digital display. The numbers were ticking down faster than I could comprehend. I looked back at the phantom. He was smiling, a wide, predatory grin that stretched across his face in the dim light. I see Cole, he called out, his voice carrying across the water, amplified by the stillness of the night. The symphony has begun, and I am merely a discordant note. The ticking intensified, a frantic heartbeat in the silent marina. I had seconds. I had to disarm it, but how? I had no expertise, only a desperate hope and a sinking certainty that I was too late. I stared at the device, my mind a chaotic storm of desperation and regret. This was it. The final, terrible crescendo. The ticking was a hammer against my eardrums, each beat echoing the frantic pulse in my own throat. My fingers, trembling with a cold I couldn't shake, brushed against the cold metal casing. This wasn't a bomb, not in the crude sense. It was an intricate clockwork, a miniature diorama of gears and springs counting down to what? A signal, a release. The marina air, thick with the scent of salt and decay, pressed in on me at the yacht marina after midnight. Wrong slip number. I had no expertise, only a desperate, bone-deep certainty that this wasn't the end. Not like this. Not with the phantom's laughter still ringing in the wind, a taunt from the shadows. I stared at the device, my mind racing through every detail I'd gleaned, every pattern I'd forced myself to remember from the old case. Precision. Symbolism. A theatrical flourish before the final curtain. My gaze snapped to the small, almost imperceptible wire snaking from the device, disappearing into the dark hull of the yacht. It wasn't meant to explode, it was meant to trigger something else. A trap for me. Clever, I murmured, my voice hoarse, a dry rasp against the wind's shriek. The phantom wanted a show, a grand finale, and I was the star. I didn't disarm it, I couldn't. Instead, I tore at the thin wire with a desperate strength, ignoring the pain as the sharp edges bit into my skin. It snapped with a barely audible ping, and the ticking device, suddenly bereft of its purpose, slowed, stuttered, and died. Then a voice smooth as polished glass sliced through the quiet. "A shame, Cole, I was meant to be more explosive." I spun, my old service pistol already in my hand, its weight a familiar comfort. Standing at the end of the gangway, framed by the skeletal masts of the other vessels, was a figure. Not a stranger, not really. "I should have known," I said, the words tasting like ash. "All those years ago. The meticulousness, the artistry. It was I, wasn't it?" The figure stepped forward, and the faint glow from a distant dock lamp caught the edges of a face I'd seen 1,000 times in official reports, in photographs, in the periphery of my own memory. It was the forensics expert from my old precinct. The man who had been lauded for his invaluable insights into the very crimes that had broken me. "Of course," the forensics expert replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Who better to understand the intricacies of a masterpiece than its creator and its admirer?" My breath hitched. The pieces, scattered for so long, slammed into place with a sickening thud. The access to crime scenes, the knowledge of evidence, the subtle misdirections in reports that had always nagged at me, just below the surface of my consciousness. He hadn't been analyzing the killer's methods, he had been perfecting his own. He chuckled, a low, unsettling sound that bounced off the silent hulls. "Why? For the beauty of it, Cole, the symmetry, the dance between chaos and order. I, of all people, understood. I saw the patterns even when others dismissed them as random acts of depravity. He held nothing in his hands, yet his presence felt like a weapon. I let me take the fall, I accused, the old wound tearing open anew. I watched me lose everything. A necessary sacrifice for the narrative," he said, shrugging, as if discussing the weather. My descent, my obsession, it added a layer of delicious irony to the whole affair. The hunter becoming the haunted, it was too good to resist. My grip tightened on the pistol. This wasn't just about catching a killer anymore, it was about reclaiming the ghost of myself. The weight of years, of sleepless nights, of gnawing doubt pressed down. They were just a way to draw me out, to finish what I started. "Precisely," he confirmed, his gaze sweeping over the yacht, then to the snapped wire at my feet. "A final performance. The same methods, the same meticulous planning designed to echo the past. I knew I'd follow the breadcrumbs. I knew I couldn't resist the pull of my own failure." He took another step, then another, closing the distance between us. My finger hovered over the trigger, but I hesitated. He wasn't armed, not visibly. This was his game, his stage. He wanted me to play it his way. I wanted me to think I'd stopped something, only for the yacht to explode moments later. A final, grand gesture for the disgraced detective. His smile widened, a truly unsettling sight. I always were perceptive, Cole, not at him but past him. My gaze flickered, and in that split second the forensics expert saw his chance. He lunged, not towards me but towards the water, a desperate, fluid motion. "No!" I roared, but it was too late. He plunged into the black depths of the marina, disappearing beneath the surface with barely a splash. He was breathing heavily, a grim set to his jaw. "Cole, are I all right?" We heard the... I stood there, pistol still raised, staring at the churning water where the forensics expert had vanished. The anger, the rage, the bitter satisfaction of understanding, all mixed with a profound sense of incompleteness. He had escaped, or had he? The colleague moved to the edge of the dock, shining a powerful flashlight into the water. Nothing. The depths swallowed the light, reflecting only the oily sheen of the marina. "He planned this too," I said, my voice flat. "He always had an escape route, he always had a backup plan." The colleague looked at me, his expression unreadable. "We'll get him, Cole, we have enough now, the patterns, the forensics reports. It all makes sense. The old case, my dismissal, he was manipulating everything." I nodded slowly, the pistol lowering. The wind picked up again, a mournful cry through the rigging. The yacht marina after midnight, wrong slip number, was still and silent, a testament to the Phantom's failed final act. The immediate threat was gone, the ticking stopped, the grand explosion averted. But the man, the monster, was still out there, or was he? A flicker of movement in the water further down the dock near the pilings. It was a hand, limp, unmoving. We pulled him out, the forensics expert, his face pale and slack. His eyes were open, staring blankly at the night sky. No struggle, no fight. He hadn't planned for this. He had planned to escape. I looked at his face, the features now stripped of their cunning, their malicious amusement. Just a man dead in the water. The architect of my ruin, the phantom of my past, now a silent corpse. The resolution wasn't a triumphant capture, no dramatic chase. The silence wasn't just the absence of ticking. It was the silence of a story finally, brutally concluded. My demons hadn't been confronted in a blaze of glory, but in the quiet, grim reality of a life extinguished. The heists would cease. My name, perhaps, would finally be cleared. I was free, but the cost had been everything. And at the Yacht Marina, after midnight, wrong slip number, I finally allowed myself to simply breathe.